Michael and I had been married for 7 years, and from the outside we looked like the perfect couple. A comfortable house in the suburbs, a neat garden, the steady rhythm of two people who had built a life together. But comfort has a way of dulling the edges of passion. The routines that once felt safe became heavy, predictable, and lifeless. Nights blurred into each other. Quiet dinners, television murmuring in the background, the warmth of a body next to mine in bed but no spark, no intensity. I loved him, or at least I told myself I did, but the truth was harder to admit. I was lonely even in his presence. Michael was always working late, pouring himself into projects that seemed endless. He was ambitious, responsible, admired by his colleagues, and I was proud of him for it. But pride doesn't fill the empty spaces in the heart. Slowly, his absence carved a hollow in me, one I never wanted to name out loud. I smiled when he came home exhausted, kissed his cheek, asked about his day. He answered distractedly, sometimes not at all. I tried to tell myself that marriages go through phases, that this was normal, that my yearning for something more was selfish. But the silence in our house grew louder with each passing week. It was during this quiet unraveling that Michael's two closest friends seemed to appear more and more often. James had been around since college. Quick-witted, playful, the kind of man who could light up a room with a joke. Robert was the opposite. Steady, reserved, always watching rather than speaking. His words measured. They both came by often, sometimes to watch a game with Michael, sometimes to help him with projects around the house. Over the years, I'd grown comfortable with them, too comfortable perhaps. I laughed at James's teasing, found comfort in Robert's thoughtful silences. They were familiar, like extensions of Michael himself. But somewhere along the way, that familiarity shifted into something else. It started small, the kind of moments that could easily be brushed aside. James's hand brushing against mine when we both reached for a glass. The way Robert's eyes lingered a second too long when I passed by. Compliments delivered casually. "You look beautiful today, Emily," but with an undertone that made my pulse quicken. I told myself it was nothing, harmless banter, but I felt my cheeks flush long after the words faded. I knew I should ignore it, dismiss it as imagination, but each moment burrowed under my skin, awakening something restless inside me. One evening, after Michael had left for yet another late night at the office, James dropped by unexpectedly. He leaned casually against the doorway, his smile easy, his words teasing. "You shouldn't let him leave you alone so often," he said. His tone light but his eyes sharp. I laughed it off, but the echo of his words lingered long after he left. Not long after that, Robert came by to return a tool Michael had lent him. He stood in the doorway a little too long, his gaze steady, almost heavy, as though he was weighing words he never spoke. The air between us felt charged, though nothing was said. When he finally left, I closed the door quickly, pressing my back against it, my breath shallow. The guilt came in waves. These were Michael's friends, men he trusted, men who had shared years of laughter and memories with him. Entertaining even the smallest spark of attraction felt like a betrayal. But late at night, when Michael lay asleep beside me, the thoughts crept back. I wondered what it meant, wondered if they thought of me when I wasn't around, wondered if they had ever spoken about me to each other. My mind twisted with possibilities, half ashamed, half thrilled. I began to notice more. The way James's jokes sometimes carried a double meaning. How Robert's silence seemed to hide something unspoken. Every shared glance felt like a secret, every laugh like a step closer to something forbidden. I told myself I would never cross that line, that this was only curiosity, nothing more. But temptation doesn't always come crashing in. Sometimes it drips slowly, drop by drop, until the ground beneath your feet is already soaked and unsteady. One night, Michael mentioned offhandedly how grateful he was to have such loyal friends. "James and Robert would do anything for me," he said, smiling, unaware of how those words pierced through me like a blade. I nodded, forcing a smile, my heart pounding with shame. If only he knew the thoughts I buried, the fleeting looks I couldn't forget. His trust in them, in me, felt unbearable. I excused myself quickly, retreating to the bathroom where I stared at my reflection. My face looked the same, but inside I felt like someone else entirely, a stranger capable of things I wasn't ready to admit. I never imagined the line would blur so quickly, or that I would even be standing near it. But the truth was undeniable. A seed had been planted, and whether I wanted it to grow or not, it had already taken root. Michael had barely kissed me goodbye when he rushed out the door that evening, briefcase in hand, phone buzzing with urgent calls. He told me he would be out late, maybe even overnight depending on how long the meeting dragged on. I smiled, wished him luck, and watched the door close behind him. The sound of the lock sliding into place echoed through the quiet house. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence, aware of the hollowness that filled the rooms when he wasn't around. That silence had become my constant companion. It wasn't long after he left that I heard the knock. James's familiar voice carried through the door, casual and cheerful, as though it were the most natural thing in the world for him to drop by unannounced. Behind him stood Robert, quieter as always, his expression unreadable. "We thought we'd keep you company," James said with a grin. "Didn't want you sitting here bored while Michael works himself to death." My first instinct was to refuse, to make some excuse and close the door. But instead I stepped aside and let them in. The evening unfolded in a way that felt ordinary at first. We sat in the living room, the television flickering with a game none of us were really watching. James filled the air with jokes, his laughter infectious, while Robert sat back, observing in silence. But beneath the surface of that easy atmosphere was something heavier, unspoken but alive. Every glance, every brush of movement, every pause in conversation carried weight. I could feel it pressing against me, daring me to acknowledge it. James leaned closer at one point, his voice low. "You know, Emily, Michael's lucky. Not every guy has someone like you waiting for him." The words landed like a spark in dry grass. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, but my pulse betrayed me, racing beneath the calm exterior I tried to hold. Robert's eyes flicked toward me then, steady and knowing, as though he could read the thoughts I was struggling to hide. Time stretched strangely after that, each moment thick with implication. We poured drinks, the casual clinking of glasses masking the tension that coiled tighter around us. James teased me, his comments playful but edged with meaning. Robert said little, but his silence was louder than words. His presence heavy, watchful. I told myself I should end it, send them home before things went too far. But I didn't. Some part of me wanted to see what would happen if I didn't stop it. It happened slowly, like a line being crossed one hesitant step at a time. James was the first to break the invisible barrier. His hand brushed mine, lingered, and when I didn't pull away, his touch grew bolder. My breath caught, guilt crashing through me, but my body betrayed me with stillness. I whispered his name in protest, but the sound carried no strength. Robert shifted forward then, not with James's boldness but with quiet inevitability, as though he'd been waiting for this moment all along. The room seemed to shrink around us, the air heavy, charged, impossible to escape. I remember fragments more than details, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, the way James's laughter softened into something darker, the silence of Robert's steady breathing close by. I remember the way guilt flooded me even as I gave in, the way I felt myself split in two, one part horrified at what I was doing, the other unable or unwilling to stop. I wanted to believe I was being swept along, that it wasn't a choice, but deep down I knew better. When it was over, the silence was unbearable. James pulled back with his usual nonchalance, his grin casual, almost careless. Robert didn't meet my eyes as he stood. His movements stiff, deliberate. Neither spoke of what had just happened, and I found myself grateful and terrified at the same time. They left soon after, the door clicking shut behind them, leaving me alone in the suffocating quiet of my living room. I sat there motionless, the weight of what I had done crashing down on me. My hands trembled as I pressed them against my face, as though I could hide from myself. The betrayal was real now, not just a temptation, not just a thought. I had crossed the line, and there was no way to undo it. Michael's face filled my mind, His trust, his smile, his words about how much he valued his friends. The guilt pressed down like a stone on my chest. And yet, beneath the shame, another truth pulsed quietly, one I hated myself for admitting. Part of me had wanted it. Part of me had been waiting for it. That thought was more dangerous than the act itself, because it meant this wasn't just a mistake. It was a desire I had let bloom in the shadows until it consumed me. I told myself it was over, that it would never happen again, that I would bury this night so deep it would never see the light. But as I lay awake in bed later, listening to the distant sound of Michael's car pulling into the driveway, I realized with a chill that the betrayal had only just begun. Michael came home the next morning looking exhausted but content, his tie loose around his neck, his briefcase heavy in his hand. He kissed my cheek as if nothing had changed, as if I hadn't already crossed a line that could never be erased. "It went well," he said, smiling faintly. "I think things are finally moving in the right direction." I nodded, forcing my lips to curl upward, but inside my chest my heart ached with the weight of what I was hiding. He had no idea that while he was out building his future, I had been tearing apart our marriage in a single night. I busied myself with breakfast, setting a plate in front of him, pouring his coffee, pretending everything was as it had always been. But I couldn't meet his eyes for long. Every time he looked at me, I felt the sting of guilt rush to the surface. His trust was still there, unbroken in his gaze, and I wondered how long I could hold his belief in me before it cracked into pieces. The days that followed were a blur of careful performance. I laughed at his jokes, asked about his work, played the role of the supportive wife. But when he left the house, the silence returned, louder than ever. Every creak of the floor reminded me of James's laughter. Every shadow against the wall reminded me of Robert's steady presence. Their absence was haunting, not comforting, and I realized I had let them leave more than memories behind. I avoided them at first, telling myself that distance would bury what had happened. But James had a way of weaving himself back in. He came by casually, his smile sharp, his words laced with teasing that only I could interpret differently now. "You holding up okay?" he asked one afternoon when Michael wasn't around. His tone was light, but his eyes lingered, reminding me of that night. He didn't have to say more. The silence between us carried the weight of everything we had done. Robert was different. He avoided me whenever possible, his eyes darting away, his voice clipped and formal when he couldn't escape a conversation. But his silence was worse than James's teasing. It made me feel judged, as if he carried the betrayal on his shoulders as heavily as I did, though I couldn't tell if it was guilt or disappointment that kept him distant. Either way, his absence gnawed at me, leaving me with unanswered questions. At night, when Michael reached for me in bed, my body stiffened. I told myself it was exhaustion, but really it was the sharp contrast between his gentle touch and the memory of what I had allowed. Each kiss from him felt counterfeit, each whispered, "I love you," a reminder of the lie that had rooted itself inside me. I wanted to confess, to purge myself of the secret before it consumed me. But the image of his face breaking apart under the truth was unbearable. The silence, I decided, was kinder than the truth. Or at least that was the lie I told myself to survive. One evening, while Michael sat at the table praising James and Robert for being such loyal friends, I nearly broke. "I don't know what I'd do without them," he said warmly, and I swallowed hard, my throat tight with the urge to scream out the truth. Instead, I smiled and nodded, my palms sweating under the table. If only he knew. If only he could see the betrayal sitting right in front of him, wearing the face of the woman he trusted most. The paranoia grew in me like a storm cloud. I wondered if James would ever say something, if Robert would let the secret slip in a moment of anger. Every time my phone buzzed, I feared it would be a message exposing me. Every gathering felt like a trap, every shared glance a reminder that I was living on borrowed time. I learned to smile through it, to laugh at Michael's stories, to kiss him goodnight as though nothing were wrong. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling. Some nights, I stood at the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection, trying to recognize the woman looking back at me. She looked the same eyes, same smile, same hair, but she wasn't me anymore. She was someone who had crossed a line, who carried a shadow that could never be erased. I thought about telling Michael everything, about falling to my knees and begging for forgiveness. But then I pictured the devastation in his eyes, the trust shattering, the life we had built crumbling around us. I couldn't bear it. And so I chose silence. Michael still kisses me good morning, still tells me he loves me, still believes in the illusion of our life together. But I know the truth, and it hangs between us like a curtain of smoke, invisible but suffocating. James still smirks when he catches my eye. Robert still avoids me, and I still carry the secret alone. Sometimes, when I lie awake beside Michael, I wonder what will happen when the truth finally surfaces. Because secrets like this don't stay buried forever. They linger in every word left unsaid, in every glance stolen, in every kiss that tastes of guilt. And though I tell myself I can carry it, that I can hide it for as long as it takes, deep down I know the truth. Betrayal doesn't end in the moment it happens. Echoes, grows, it becomes part of you. And no matter how carefully you hide it, it's only a matter of time before it consumes everything.